Hello, welcome to the Manasplained podcast. I'm Connor. Today I'm talking about the deck I built for Hazezon Tamar. So, Hazezon Tamar is interesting because he got a rework in a new card called Hazezon Shaper of Sands that also does stuff with the desert creature tokens, but that one cares more about actual desert lands, while this one only cares about just having lands out and not having lands enter or anything like that. So the way I built this deck was just have a ton of lands out, and then you play Hazezon, and then you kill Hazezon, because the way Hazezon's ability work is when he enters the battlefield, during your next upkeep, you make X 1/1 Sand Warrior creature tokens, where X is the number of lands you control. And then if Hazezon would leave the battlefield, you exile all Sand Warrior tokens you control. So the way you want this deck to run is you get Hazezon out, you blink him a couple of times so you get multiple triggers of his ability, and then you want to kill him so he's not on the board anymore. That way when it comes around to your upkeep, you get a couple different triggers of making all those 1/1s, and you don't have to worry about Hazezon dying and getting rid of them all. So that's how I kind of just designed the deck. You can also get around the Sand Warriors dying if Hazezon gets blinked by changing the tokens into something else, which I also do. I really like the direction I went with this deck and how you can get a bunch of tokens and then get rid of Hazezon in order to keep them around. I think it's a very interesting way to use his ability. So yeah, let me jump into the deck. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and comment. I love talking to you guys down in the comments after these videos go live. I love hearing what you think about the deck, cards you would add, cards you would take out, etc. Liking and subscribing and all that stuff helps grow the channel. It helps get this video to more people. Don't forget to share it with your friends. I really appreciate it. And let's jump into the deck breakdown. So for the deck breakdown, I have 8 theme, 5 sub-theme, 5 synergy, 1 protection, 5 kill Hazezon cards, because after you activate Hazezon's ability a couple of times, you have to kill him. And then I have 7 draw, 23 ramp, 8 removal, 2 board wipes, and 40 lands. So the deck runs a ton of lands and a ton of ramp, because that's kind of like the main theme of the deck, but like because ramp's its own category, I didn't have to make that like the theme. Theme can be something else, which is the blink stuff. I really like how the deck came together. Having this much ramp means you're going to have a lot of mana to do awesome stuff with, because Hazezon does cost 7 mana. If he dies, he costs 9, and so on and so forth. So the deck does require a lot of mana in order to run, because some of the cards you have that you could kill Hazezon with cost mana to activate or whatever. So you kind of want to have that balance of having a ton of lands and a ton of ramp so that you can have the mana required, but then also being able to kill them off and whatever when you need to. All in all, that leaves 5 crossover cards, which is not much, but then again, it's better than 0. So we'll start off with the theme. The theme is bounce effects, getting him to use multiple times, and then replacement effects so that you don't have to kill Hazezon, because the tokens you will make won't be Sand Warrior tokens. These are the 2 cards that are replacement effects. Divine Visitation makes 4/4 White Angel creature tokens, and then Ginny Fae either makes 2/2 cats with haste or 3/1 dogs with vigilance. Both these cards are great. Divine Visitation is absolutely insane. I've run it in a couple different token decks I've made to great success, because this card is obnoxious and ridiculous. Turning 1/1s into 4/4s with flying can really end the game pretty quickly. And then Ginny Fae also turning 1/1s into either 2/2s or 3/1s can really help close the game out and let you keep Hazezon on the board to blink him even more times to make more tokens. These are probably the 2 most synergistic cards in the deck with the commander, because of how they interact in that way. And if you have either of these out, the deck just runs so much smoother. These are some blink effects I put in the deck, while Stronic Resonator and Harmonic can like copy his ability. So they all essentially do the same thing, give you multiple triggers of Hazezon's ability. Ephemerate and Cloud Shift being 1 mana, just pop it, it's so great. And then Teleportation Circle and Conjurer's Closet, since they stick around if Hazezon, when you kill him eventually, if say there's a board wipe and all the creatures die, you could get Hazezon back out, Conjurer's Closet or Teleportation Circle, bounce him on your end step, and then kill him off sometime later. All of these cards are fantastic, and I really like this theme package here of bouncing and then token replacement. So killing Hazezon, there's ways you could just easily off him with getting like menial effects that aren't very great, but I wanted to get a pretty solid benefit from offing Hazezon. So these are all the sacrifice outlets I put in. Goblin Bombardment, it's sacrifice creature, deal 1 damage to any target. Not only can you use this with Hazezon to deal damage to people's face or remove creatures, you can also use it to kill other people's creatures with the sand tokens you get or whatever, so that you can deal a bunch of damage with them, which is a great outlet for that, especially if someone's going to go play a board wipe. You can just activate Goblin Bombardment a bunch to get in some value with the creatures before they die. Fanatical Devotion. If someone plays a board wipe, if you sacrifice half the creatures, it'll survive. It'll leave the other half alive. It's a great card. 3-mana enchantment without having any cost to sacrifice is just amazing. Perilous Forays is really interesting because you can pay 1 mana, sack a creature, and get a land with a basic land type onto the battlefield. Not basic land, it means type. So if something's like your Forest Plains or whatever, you can get those with this, which is awesome. Evolutionary Leap will draw you a creature if you pay 1 green and sacrifice a creature, which is great. There's not a lot of creatures in this deck, and they're all super impactful. So being able to sacrifice Hazezon with it or one of the sand tokens in order to get a creature of more value is fantastic. And then Industrial Advancement, at the beginning of your end step, you sacrifice a creature, and then you look at the top X card of your library, X that creature's mana value. Hazezon costs 7, so you get to look at the top 7 cards, and you can put a creature from among them onto the battlefield. There aren't a lot of creatures in this deck, but Industrial Advancement just lets you get an easy sacrifice in, and then you get some benefit because he does cost 7. So the sub-theme is land recursion from the graveyard. With all of the fetches I'm running in this deck, I wanted a way to get them back and reuse them, because, I mean, it's just more lands that you get to play out and keep churning through lands so that you have a lot of them for when you eventually cast Hazezon. Mending the Dominaria is an awesome saga. I've run it in a couple decks before, and every time I play it, it just goes so well. The fact that the first 2 chapters will mill you 4 cards and return creature cards from your graveyard to your hand, and then when it hits chapter 3, all of your land cards from the graveyard enter the battlefield. It's so strong. It's such a good card. I love running it. Also, the art on it is phenomenal. Conduit of Worlds and Rainmap Excavator just let you play your land for turn from your graveyard. Conduit of Worlds is also really good because if you don't cast any spells in your turn, you can tap it and cast this permanent spell from your graveyard. It's amazing. I love both of these cards, and in any deck with a ton of fetch lands, they have so much value. You never miss land drops. Redemption Choir, Sun Titan, 2 more recursion-y cards. They both get permanents with mana value 3 or less from your graveyard to the battlefield. Redemption Choir does have the Coven requirement to activate, but I'm sure you'll be able to get around that given the varying powers and toughnesses of all the different cards you're going to have, and the fact that they'll just keep getting lands out is amazing, and Sun Titan and Redemption Choir can even get some other permanents out that cost 3 or less. So because you have this giant army of tokens, you're going to want to be attacking with them, and that's what the synergy category is about. So Mirari's Wake, also in the ramp category later, is a ridiculous card, and it goes in practically every Selesnya deck. It's just one of the strongest enchantments when bang for buck. At 5 mana, essentially doubling your mana plus giving your creatures an anthem effect. It's kind of ridiculous. Beastmaster's Ascension, if you attack with 7 creatures over the course of a game, you get +5/+5 to all your creatures, which is just insane. Intangible Virtue, giving all your creature tokens +1/+1 vigilance is great. And that Roar of Resistance, giving all of your tokens haste, and then you can pay 1 in a red, and all of the attacking creatures get +2/+0, which is also nuts. And then Bitter Reunion's a draw card that you can later on pay 1 and sacrifice to give your creatures haste. So all of these cards help get your Sand Warriors over the attack line and into other people's health bars. Only running 1 protection spell, and that's Fanatical Devotion. Showed it earlier. It's just such a good card. If you're running any kind of token strategy, being able to sacrifice those creature tokens in order to regenerate some of your key pieces, say you're in like a Orzhov kind of aristocrats deck, you could sacrifice some stuff to protect your like engine pieces and stuff. I really like Fanatical Devotion, and I think it's a really nice card. So because we're in Naya and we're not running like a big stompy deck, you don't get to run as many of the draw effects that care about giant creatures. So there isn't as many draw effects, unfortunately, but they're still pretty good and they do synergize with what's going on. So you already saw Evolutionary Leaf and Bitter Reunion, but the other 3 here are just great draw engines, or draw spells. Shamanic Revelation, drawing a card for each creature you control. Once you get all those Sand Warriors out, you get a bunch of cards with that. Harmonize, just classic 4 mana, draw 3. One of the best draw spells in green just because it's so consistent. And then Skull Clamp being an insane draw engine. For 1 mana, you get to put it onto the board, and then for 1 mana, you get to draw 2 cards. And then for 1 mana again, you get to draw 2 cards. Yes, you're killing off your creatures if you have 1/1s or 0/1s or whatever. But at the same time, it gets you so much value and so much just like access to cards. Skull Clamp is honestly ridiculous. And then the 2 best draw cards in the deck are these 2, because they draw cards whenever a creature you control deals combat damage to a player. It's not 1 or more, it's whenever a creature. So you hit with 5 creatures, you draw 5 cards. Toski having Indestructible is amazing, and Rowan Frostfang giving all of your creatures Death Touch is also amazing. Both these creatures are insane, and they go in any deck with green that you're doing a lot of attacking, I think, because the amount of card draw and value these cards give is, again, ridiculous. So the ramp category, which is what you're all waiting for probably, seeing what I'm doing, and it's a very typical ramp package for getting all of your lands out. And because I have all that graveyard land recursion stuff going on, I thought I'd run a bunch of the ramp spells that sacrifice lands. So Harrow and Roiling Regrowth and Springboom Druid, they're all just sacrifice a land and then search for 2 basics and put them onto the battlefield. Harrow is untapped, while Roiling Regrowth and Springboom Druid they enter tapped. But besides that, they're all basically the same cards and they're super strong. Then Entish Restoration is really interesting because it's like those, except it cares about having a creature with power 4 or greater on the board. And then if you do, you get 3 basics and put them onto the battlefield. I don't know how often you're going to have a creature with power 4 or greater out in this deck, but it's just another, at worst, it's a Harrow, and at most, it's, or at lowest, it's a Roiling Regrowth, and at most, it's Roiling Regrowth +1. So, yeah, Entish Restoration, awesome card. Also, the art is beautiful, and because you have the recursion with Sun Titan and whatnot, you get to run some more creatures that ramp out. Wood Elves and Farhaven Elf also synergize really well with Skull Clamp and the other sacrifice effects, because once they're out, they get you the land and you can use them for other things like that. Sakura Tribuilder has sacrificed itself, but it's a creature version of Rampant Growth, which is fantastic. And then Topiary Stomper, being a 4/4 version of Wood Elves or Farhaven Elf, is awesome. It also has Vigilance. Topiary Stomper's like insane. And some more really good ramp spells: Skyshroud Claim and Ranger's Path, 2 of my favorite ramp spells in green. They're double nature lores by just going and finding 2 forests. Skyshroud Claim gets them untapped, while Ranger's Path gets them tapped, which is unfortunate about Ranger's Path, but still getting that color fixing is amazing. Fastwood Surge has the kicker, so if you spend 8, you get to put 2 1/1 counters on all of your creatures. So that's for late game. After you get a bunch of Sand Warriors out, you can make them into 3/3s, which is really nice. Migration Path, if you don't need the ramp, you can always cycle it for another card for 2 mana, which is also really nice. And then Cultivate and Kodama's Reach are 3 mana rampant growths that also draw you a land. The rest of the 2 mana ramp sources, you know them, you love them. The most important ones here of note are Nature's Lore and 3 Visits, finding new forest cards that are untapped so you can fix your mana. Farseek, not being able to find a forest but can find a plains or a mountain, also being able to color fix is super nice. And I am running all of the dual type snow lands, so Into the North can find your snow mountain plains. And then these are the oddball ramp cards that didn't really fit into the other categories. Splendid Reclamation, just getting all your lands back from your graveyard to the battlefield tapped, is kind of nuts, honestly. Reshape the Earth, 9 mana, get 10 land cards from your battlefield, from your library onto the battlefield tapped. Also bonkers. Perilous Forays, again, you already saw that earlier. Mirari's Wake you saw earlier. All these oddball ramp spells are absolutely amazing in this deck. Now, because we're in Naya, we do have access to some pretty good removal. I am running a couple removal spells that you wouldn't normally see, but that's because you could use them on Hazezon if you had the extra mana to get a benefit. So, Get Lost is the new hotness. It came out in Lost Caverns of Ixalan, and it's kind of ridiculous. Destroy target creature, enchantment, or planeswalker, and then its controller makes 2 map tokens. Map tokens they're kind of like bad clue tokens, because in order for them to work, you have to pay and tap them, and then target creature explores. And the way Explore works is, if it's a land, you draw it, and then if it's a non-land, you put a 1/1 counter on your creature, and then you surveil 1. I'm pretty sure that's how it works. Yeah, it's still a pretty good effect if you're running a deck that cares a lot about exploring, but if your deck doesn't care about exploring, it really doesn't matter. So Get Lost really can... the 2 map tokens really aren't that big of a deal. And then, yeah, Dismantling Wave, absolutely ridiculous. Swords and Path, also absolutely ridiculous. And if you want to, you could path your own Hazezon so that you can go get another land out for his ability when it activates later, and it gets rid of him. So yeah, also phenomenal in this deck. You can do that kind of tech with it. And then the other kind of the oddball removal spell in this deck is Oblation, because the owner of target non-land permanent shuffles it into the library and then draws 2 cards. So you cast that on Hazezon, you let it go to the command zone, and then you get to shuffle your library, but then you get to draw 2 cards. It's 3 mana, getting rid of Hazezon and drawing 2 cards, which is really nice, honestly, if you have the mana for it. But other words, you could later on spend that on one of your tokens to draw cards. I didn't put it in the draw category because you're going to use it as removal often as well. If someone plays a really big threat, you'd rather them have the 2 cards than the absolute house of a card they may have dropped, like a Bolus of Sil or something ridiculous. And it also doesn't give them anything on the board at the time. It doesn't give them a creature token or something like that. So oftentimes you can use Oblation to help get rid of a creature so you can go in for an attack. So for the board wipes, because the creatures are low to the ground, they're 1/1s often, I want a board wipe that wouldn't deal with them. So Elspeth, one of the strongest planeswalkers probably ever printed, making 3 1/1s as a +1 is stupid. And then -3 being a board wipe, also stupid. And then her ultimate, giving you an emblem with a double anthem and flying for your creatures, is even more stupid. Elspeth is ridiculous, and I try to run her as much as I can because she's so strong. And Austere Command is just a good classic whiteboard wipe that can not hit all of your creatures because they're going to be 1/1s. So for the lands aren't anything super crazy, but they are just often typed so that you can find them with your different fetches, like, oh my god, what's it called? Croson Verge, and all of the spells that find typed lands like Nature's Lore. So yeah, Jetmir's Garden, I would like to say, the Triomes and the Streets of New Capenna Tri-lands. Jetmir's Garden right now on Card Kingdom, I think goes for like $15, $17 American. That is obscene. I understand these lands are strong because they're fetchable, they're tri-lands, they can cycle, they do all the good things. But they should be more accessible than like $15, $17, $20, whatever some of them are. Like, I don't understand why lands have to be so expensive. I wish lands like Jetmir's Garden were more cheaper and more approachable, so that mana bases just overall you have more flexibility when making them, even if you're making like a budget mana base, because some of these lands out here are way too expensive. Beyond that, High Market and Oran Reef the Vastwood are like my 2 fun lands in the deck. High Market's another sack outlet for Hazezon. It only gains you a life, but it's a sack outlet on a land, which is really nice. And then Oran Reef the Vastwood, because all of the Sand Warriors are red, white, and green, you can tap Oran Reef the Vastwood to put a 1/1 counter on all of them when they enter the battlefield on your next turn. So yeah, those are the 2 special lands in the deck, and the rest of the deck is pretty standard Naya stuff. So I had a really difficult time making cuts for this deck. I went in a bunch of different directions. I was trying to make a Hazezon deck where both Hazezons could be in it and doing some desert stuff, but then at the end of the day, they are very different in what they're trying to do. Hazezon wants you to get his ability activated a few times, then you get rid of him, while Hazezon, Shaper of Sand, cares about getting deserts to enter the battlefield, and so their abilities, like, they kind of synergize because they're both about getting lands, but Hazezon Tamar is about having a vast wealth of lands, while Shaper of Sand is about just getting deserts in the battlefield and then bouncing them back to your hand so you can play them again, or getting them to your graveyard so you can play them again. You won't have as vast of a land count because you're constantly cycling them in and out of the board. So yeah, because of that, I wasn't able to do that strategy, so that's why some of the cuts are what they are. Impact Tremors I didn't put in because it's too low impact before all the guys come in, and I'd rather have other cards that can have impact before I cast Hazezon and after, like I did with Goblin Bombardment. Guttural Response, my dream is to Guttural Response a Cyclonic Rift. That is honestly one of my Magic the Gathering dreams, because being able to hit like the blue instant that is one of the strongest in the format with one of these just sounds hilarious. Legion Loyalty, again, that card is insane. Giving all of your creatures Myriad is kind of ridiculous. Myriad, if you didn't know it, whenever you attack with a creature, you make a token copy that's tapped and attacking each of your other opponents, and then those tokens get exiled at the end of combat. So if you're playing against 3 opponents, you only have to attack one person, and then that one creature will attack everybody. It's really good for getting ETBs, but with this deck, for 8 mana, I feel like I would need a card to be more impactful. Legion Loyalty is really strong in other decks, just I didn't think it was impactful enough here. Eldrazi Monument. This card is ridiculous in token decks, but you want to have a consistent stream of tokens so that you can sacrifice every turn. You don't really notice the creature going away. But with this deck, you're not really having a consistent stream. Instead, you're just like dumping a bucket of tokens onto the battlefield. So I didn't really feel like a Drowsy Monument would be a good fit here. Huatli is, whenever you're making a token strategy, just an insane planeswalker, because you get a ton of loyalty counters. So you can realistically cast Huatli, +1 it, and then you get it above 8, and then you can -8 it, where you get this amazing emblem that draws you cards whenever a creature enters the battlefield. But at the same time, it's such a, it's so, removal on sight that with this deck, you're not able to protect it efficiently, because you don't have a lot of, ways to defend it from combat, or defend it from removal. So because of that, I just didn't think it was going to be that big of an important deal in a deck like this. Also, it's -1, giving power bump, where X is the number of creatures you control. I just didn't think that was also impactful enough, because it doesn't give trample, which it would be way better on a creature with trample, so that you can actually get some of that damage through instead of it being chump blocked. And then these are the rest of the maybe cards. There's Hazezon himself. I love Hazezon, Shaper of Sand. He has Desert Walk, which is hilarious. You can play desert lands from your graveyard, also great. And then making 2 of those Sand Warriors whenever a desert enters the battlefield, awesome. Hazezon, Shaper of Sand is such an awesome card. I'm probably going to I might build a Hazezon deck for myself. I have tried building it a few times, but I always get into the rhythm or just the kind of pitfalls of whenever I'm throwing a landfall, a land heavy deck together, it always just feels so samey and boring. You're going to be running those same, the typical just, hey, these cards are super good with lands, and every land deck has them because they're so strong. I find at least decks with green that are very land focused run into the same issue that Enchantress decks run into, where enchantment themed decks they all run the same cards because those are the cards you put in an enchantment deck. I feel like you fall into that pit with land decks a lot, unfortunately. That being said, Primeval Herald, I almost put it in. It was very close. It being 4 mana and being a miniature Primeval Titan is very cool, because it gets basics instead of any land. But at the same time, I'd rather have all of the other creatures that are 1/1s that cost 3 that get a land. That way, when I kill them off, I don't feel as bad about it, and I can chump block with them, and it's fine. Because with Primeval Herald, I feel like you need to get at least the 2 activations of it, once entering and once attacking, for it to actually get the value. But yeah, if you can get that off, Primeval Herald is fantastic. Oracle Meldiah is another amazing card. The problem I have with Oracle Meldiah and other cards like it is playing with the top card of your library revealed kind of sucks, because it's very different than just you can look at the top card of your library at any time, because you're giving out free information, and that's never a good thing. It's just not a good thing to give out information like that. Rampaging Baloth's just not a card that I felt was impactful enough with this deck. And then Witch's Oven is a sacrifice outlet, and it just kind of represents all the sacrifice outlets that I could have put in the deck that really just aren't impactful enough. So that was the deck. Let me know what you think down in the comments. I think it's awesome. I love Hazezon Tamar. I know he's a fan favorite among the Legends commanders. 1, because he's a Naya. 2, because lands. And then 3, because you just get to vomit a bunch of tokens out. He's so awesome. He's so cool. And then when you get to blink him a bunch of times, you put a bunch of those abilities onto the stack for your next upkeep. You get rid of him. I really love what you can do with him. He's very cool. So these are my socials. Twitch is where I stream building these decks. I won't be online until, I won't be back on Twitch until sometime late mid-January. Unfortunately, I'm going away to see family for a couple weeks to a month. I'm really excited. But yeah, which means I can't live stream on Twitch, which is a bummer, but I will be back in the new year streaming on Twitch sometime middle end of January. Twitter is when I post when these videos go live and when I go live on Twitch. It's so that you don't miss any of my content. I really appreciate if you followed me over there. When I get back from my vacation, I'm going to start making content for TikTok, YouTube Shorts, and Reddit. I already have some ideas for all that, but if you had any ideas of your own, I'd love to hear your thoughts down in the comments. And then Architect and Moxfield is where all these deck lists live. So thanks for watching, and as always, get building, splainers. Alright, that is so